Hello all. So we are in the last module of this micro robotic course. So we are now going to discuss about these bio inspired micro robots. Basically this is a kind of a second part which we will be discussing it in detail. So in this bio inspired robot, like this is slightly an advanced level compared to the earlier module what we had discussed. So in this we will take up some important case studies or important micro robots where it works on the principle of bio inspired related locomotions or bio inspired related mechanisms. So as far as the content of this module is concerned, so the content comprises of the Gecko inspired climbing robots, bio inspired fibrillar adhesive robots, lizard inspired water runner robot, then a water strider inspired water walker robot, a magnetic swimming micro robot for biomedical applications. We will also discuss about some of the medical micro robots for endoscopy and other applications. So we will also discuss about some of the key challenges which are involved in these biomedical based robots or in these micro robots or in the domain of biomimetic based micro robots in detail. Okay. Now, as far as these bio-inspired robots are concerned, so these bio-inspired micro-robots is a field that takes inspiration from the biological organism to design and develop a small-scale robotic system. Like these micro-robots which have been proposed for future biomedical applications in which they are able to navigate in viscous fluidic environment, or nature has inspired a numerous micro-robotic locomotion design which are suitable for propulsion generations at low Reynolds number. So like we have also seen different various types of locomotions which have been catered the micro-robotic system. So the various swimming method with particular focus on helical propulsion, including the E. coli bacteria, which is a kind of bacteria, and we can mimic its propulsion characteristics. There are various magnetic actuation methods for biomimetic and non-biomimetic micro robots such as rotating field, oscillating fields, or field gradient. So when we try to closely observe the mechanisms, we can classify these mechanisms under the rotating field, the oscillating fields, and the field gradient. Now, they may also be categorized as a force driven actuation, or a torque driven actuation. So like as far as these force driven actuation or torque driven actuation is concerned, these torque driven actuation scales better to the micro and nano scale than the force driven actuation. Now if we try to closely observe the need for studying this bio inspired systems are concerned, so it is always considered that the nature has always been an inspiration for robot locomotion, like for swimming, for even we have a kind of a wiggling motion, or sometimes we may need to go for a walking or a flying. So one of the main challenges for engineering locomotion method for robot is to copy or to mimic the essential functions of their natural counterpart while keeping the complexity low in order to able to build the system. So building complex device becomes increasingly difficult in the micro and nano scale because the integration of various parts is more challenging, and it is therefore crucial to capture the essential functionalities of a nature while keeping the complexities minimum. So like as far as in this micro robots are concerned, So when we try to propose these micro robots for certain drug delivery related applications or biomedical applications, etc., or sometimes we may need to propose it for a minimally invasive procedures, or we may need to project it for a targeted drug delivery, or in vitro for cell manipulation and characterization. So most of these applications place these micro devices into a fluidic or in a soft environment with reference to different applications where they have to be propelled. So ideally propulsion is considered to be one of the key factor for the movement of the system. It is therefore only the natural to investigate the locomotion method found at the micro scale in a nature for inspiration when building these micro robots. In fact, like we had discussed a lot about actuation of micro robot, we have discussed about an electrostatic based system, magnetic based systems, etc., are coupled in this particular arrangement. Now if you closely observe in this, so this biomimicking capability, basically with reference to microscale perspective point of view, it starts from the bacterial aspect. It also so we can also mimic some of the structures from the live organism, like including a lizard, etc. In fact, in Gecko we will be discussing about a type of lizard where we can mimic the overall mechanism, and based on that we can see how the system moves. Now as far as these bio-inspired motions are concerned, so as discussed earlier, so these micro robots mimics the locomotion, and it also helps in sensing and adaptability of microorganisms and insects and other biological systems to operate efficiently in a micro environment. So these are some of the AI generated micro robots, basically to give you a kind of a fascination about the locomotion. So basically here, if you closely observe in this, so we have a kind of a jellyfish based micro robot, a bacterial based micro robot, jelly inspired micro robots, a flagella based micro robots, etc. So ideally this is a kind of an imagination which basically talks about how such kind of flagella based systems can be deployed. However, when we try to look into the overall fabrication perspective point of view, they have their own challenges, because fabricating such kind of structures has its own challenges, which we will also be discussing about this in some of these lectures. Now, what is the need for going for this bio-inspired design? So as we have seen, so nature has evolved a highly efficient microscale locomotion, sensing and adaptive strategies over millions of years. By studying the biological organisms such as bacteria, insects and microorganisms, engineers can develop these micro robots, especially with effective mobility. That is, for example, you take a bacteria using a flagella for propulsion. So this is a flagellum for propulsion, which is shown over here in this figure, okay, which we will be discussing it in detail. So when as far as in this flagella is concerned, so there are like if you closely observe, so here we have the flagellum in place, then there is a passive part of motion, and then there is a active part of motion over here. So active part of motion basically comprises of a flagellum, which is a kind of like a swing kind of arrangement, which tries to create a certain amount of forces, and these forces will be helpful for the exertion of the locomotion. So this swimming motion of the bacterial flagellum, and as far as this passive part is concerned, this passive part is mainly meant for holding these particular propulsion motion. So if you keenly observe this propulsion motion, when the system rotates in a particular direction, so this propulsion motion will create a kind of an elliptical force. This elliptical force, suppose this system is inside a water body, and when there is a kind of a system, when there is a kind of a propulsion which is generated over here, what happens is there is going to be a vortex motion which is going to get generated. This vortex motion will be helpful for an appropriate locomotion. So when this vortex motion is get generated, so this makes the body to move in one direction, or sometime it will be helpful for the targeted system to propel in a particular direction. Okay, so we will discuss in detail about the different types of propulsions which have been exhibited with this flagella based system. Next, we have the smart sensing. So as far as these smart sensings are concerned, some of the key examples includes the antenna for environmental perception. Like you might have seen a cockroach. A cockroach will have an antenna kind of structure. So these antennas are mainly meant for sensing the overall like antibodies which are available next to it, or a kind of an enemy system which is next to it. Once it sends something, automatically it may rush away. So ideally there are such kind of antennas are there which are used for smart sensing applications. In fact, those antennas, the functionalities of those antennas can also be studied, and it can be explored to investigate the overall behavior of such kind of micro robots. Then we have different energy efficient mechanisms. So as far as these energy efficient mechanisms are concerned, so it's a kind of a biomimetic muscle actuation. So as far as in this case, so we have a kind of a structure. So this structure will try to open and close. When it tries to open and close, or it gets actuated appropriately, we can expect a propulsion coming out of it. So this is a kind of an energy efficient mechanism. Then we have a kind of adaptability in complex environment. Like in certain cases, we may need to use such kind of micro robots for biomedical related applications. In certain cases, we may need to use these biomedical robots for like inspection related applications. Sometimes it may need to flow in a liquid environment. Sometimes it may need to flow in a kind of a air environment, or sometimes it may need to flow in a kind of a like cloud-based environment. So such kind of systems, like it can be so when we are trying to design the mechanism, or when we are trying to train the mechanism, we may need to ensure that certain amount of adaptability is employed, and these adaptabilities are capable enough in such a way that it can cater the complex mechanisms. So like some of the soft bodied organisms navigating a confined spaces are some of the examples of such kind of bio inspired design. Now let us discuss about the different locomotion mechanism. So as far as in this particular case is concerned, there are some biologically inspired micro robots which has a certain locomotion mechanism. Like if we try to consider the bacteriella and flagella based swimming, which is used for designing a micro robot that can move in a helical propulsion. Cilia movement is concerned, which we call it as a paramecium. So this is a kind of a cilia movement which is available. So here, if you closely observe, so one kind of mechanism is a kind of a propeller like mechanism. Like we have a like helicopter. So over the helicopter, when the fan rotates, so it will try to generate a kind of a motion to the flagellum which is available over here, which will be helpful for a kind of a forward movement or a backward movement. Sometimes it can also be helpful to create a z-axis movement appropriately. Similarly, in order to have a back and forth beating, so we may need to go for the cilia movement. So as far as these cilia movements are concerned, it is called as a paramecium based system. So it is applied for micro robots that require surface interaction and coordinated movement. So it is something like this. So you have a whip. When you try to move a whip, so the base is kept fixed. However, the whip is made to move in a particular direction. Based on the movement of the whip, a force is getting generated which will be helpful for the base to move. So almost if you see over here, this is a combination of back and forth beating. So when you have a back beating and a forth beating, so appropriately you can expect a kind of a forward motion or a backward motion appropriately. So you will be having a certain amount of vibrations. These vibrations are encased appropriately in the form of a displacement. So this is called as a kind of a back and forth system, or it is called as a cilia based movement. Now another set of locomotion mechanism basically includes the insect like walking and jumping. So like these kind of mechanism is inspired by the grasshoppers. So if you see a grasshopper, so the grasshopper will have a kind of a legged kind of structure, something like this. So it will try to give a push from the base towards the an anti-gravity structure. So it's a kind of like against the gravitation it tries to move. So basically it will give a kind of a jumping nature to it, so that this jumping nature will take care of the motion. So that is, so it is something like that. You have a base, so over the base this grasshopper will be sitting, and then it will try to jump and it will try to fly towards the movement. Okay, so this kind of inspiration happens with reference to grasshopper for terrestrial micro robot. It is also used by ants. So as far as these ant structures are concerned, so when it tries to move, so it will try to create, it has a kind of a walking behavior and it also has a kind of a jumping behavior. So the walking and jumping will be deployed on these particular ant. Now we have a certain set of locomotion mechanism which is called as jellyfish and soft bodied motion. So as far as this, if you closely observe a jellyfish, so the jellyfish has a tentacle kind of structure. So these tentacle structures are kind of a very soft and a kind of a lightweight and a flexible structures. These tentacle structures are capable enough to create a kind of a push force or a pull force appropriately. Okay, so what happens is, if you closely observe a kind of a jellyfish, or even if you see an octopus, there will be a kind of structure like this, and there will be a kind of a tentacle behavior. So these tentacle behavior will either create a kind of a cilia based motion, or it may also create a flagellum based motion. A flagellum based motion can be deployed for a kind of a rotary movement, or a cilia based motion can be deployed for a kind of a forward stroke, which exhibits over here. So as far as in this jellyfish kind of structure is concerned, so we will be having a kind of a bigger layer, or we will be having a kind of a heavy headed system, followed by a kind of a simple system, so that these simple systems are capable enough in such a way that it will give a thrust to the system for the appropriate movement. So this is a kind of systems which can be expected, or these are some kind of basic classifications with reference to a locomotion and the mechanism. Now let us discuss about the sensory and the perception. So as far as these sensory systems are concerned, so we have a kind of a compound eye insect, which is a kind of a miniaturized optical sensor for micro robots. So when we try to talk about a sensory system, in fact we have discussed a lot about the sensors which is used in micro robots. In fact we have classified the different types of sensors. However, with reference to this biomimicking perspective point of view, there are certain limitations, or there are certain challenges in selecting the sensors for these biomimicking related applications or biomimicking related work. So when we try to closely look into the sensor selection, the sensor selection basically depends upon the type of adaptiveness which we are planning to consider for this micro robot. Second, the propulsion of the micro robot also plays a vital role in selecting the sensor, also in implementing the number of sensor in the structure. So like in that particular aspect, so when we try to consider a compound eye, which is a kind of an insect based system, so in this insect based system we have a kind of a miniaturized optical sensor for micro robots. Then there is a electroreception based sensors are there. So these electroreception based sensors are mainly, it is meant for a kind of, it has a touch feel, like when a kind of an external object starts coming near to a kind of an amphibian based structure, so automatically what happens is its responsiveness gets increased. So such kind of electroreception which is identified in some of the fish and the amphibians are explored, and appropriately such kind of mechanisms or such kind of sensory functionalities are deployed, which is used in bio-inspired for underwater micro robotic application. So in addition to this, there is a kind of a tactile is nothing but a kind of a touch sensor which is available. So like for example, in the case of spider hairs and in the case of antennas, which we have discussed, like when we see a cockroach, there is an antenna, it has a two antennas which is mainly meant for kind of a tactile sensing. So when some kind of object or when some kind of body comes near to it, so what happens is this antenna will detect, and then appropriately it will give a feedback to the environment in a micro manipulation task. So like these are mainly meant for sensing the overall functionality as well as the overall behavior. So it is mainly used for environmental feedback in micro manipulation task. Now, one of the key challenges with reference to these biomimicking micro robots are concerned, so it's a kind of an energy actuation. So there are different types of energies which are being used for actuating these robots. In fact, we have discussed a lot about such kind of energy actuation. However, with reference to biomimicking perspective point of view, it has its own aspects. Like for example, in the case of energy and actuation, so we have a magnetically actuated robot. So these magnetically actuated robot, it is inspired by bacteria that align with the earth magnetic field. Basically it's a kind of a magnetotactic bacteria. So like it like how you have this compass, magnetic compass, which is being aligned for a particular direction, similar to this, such kind of bacteria also aligns to the magnetic field. So appropriately we can tune the or tailor the locomotion based on our requirement. Next, we have the kind of a light driven actuation. So as far as these light driven actuations are concerned, it's a kind of a mimicking plant phototropism of movement. So ideally, like we have a capability to control the frequency of the light. So appropriate on and off of the light will be helpful for us to give appropriate locomotion in the system. This actuation can be easily controlled using this light driven actuation. Then we have a kind of a soft robotic structure using a shape memory alloy. So ideally we will be discussing about this mechanism. We have discussed about this mechanism where we have integrated a shape memory alloy for a inspired actuation. Either it might be an octopus or it might be a kind of a jellyfish kind of structure which has been deployed for the movement. Okay. Now, one of the important case study with reference to this biomimicking perspective point of view, which I would like to discuss in this particular class, is the Gecko inspired surface climbing robot. So as far as these Gecko inspired surface climbing robot is concerned, this was first established in the year 2004. Like one of the key group which was involved in is Carlan Menon and the Metin City. So they were involved in developing this Gecko inspired robot. So and then later these kind of robots were taken up in a different shape. So people started working in this particular inspiration and they have developed different mechanisms out of it. In fact, they have drawn different mechanisms from this Gecko and they have implemented in the different robotic system for its different application. So as far as these Gecko robots are concerned, so like many applications call for robots to perform the task in workspace where a traditional vehicle cannot reach. So using a robot to perform this task can afford a better human safety as well as a low cost operation. So like as far as in this particular case is concerned, so there are for example, so we have a kind of a robot which can operate vertically oriented surfaces, allows the possibility of automating the tasks which are currently accomplished manually. So like affording an extra measure of human safety often is more cost effective manner, and some of the wall climbing robots which are used today are in industry today are for cleaning of high rise buildings, etc. Like and are performing inspection in dangerous environments such as storage tanks for petroleum industries and a nuclear power plant. So in fact there are more interest in using the robot to inspect and repair of these space vehicles also. So like one of the key aspects, so when we try to consider this as an application, one of the major aspect which comes into our picture is a kind of a lizard kind of structure. So as far as these lizard kind of structures are concerned, so these like if we can mimic a lizard kind of structure, so it has some capability to climb the wall and then appropriately we can using a manipulator operations can be performed. So one of the key mechanisms which is involved in this is the kind of a suction mechanism which is being placed. So now when we try to relate with an actual lizard, that is a kind of a lizard which possess naturally built functional surface textures that enable them to walk, climb or on the versatile topographies. So this biomimicking the surface character. So here we may need to look into two important mechanisms. One is biomimicking the surface characteristics, and the other one is biomimicking the locomotion. And third one is biomimicking the suction. So, like these biomimicking the surface characteristics of these geckos have a enormous potential to improve the accessibility of these modern micro robots. So therefore, these gecko inspired like adhesives have a significant industry applications, like which we had discussed about a biomedical cleaning, a medical bandage tapes, a rock climbing adhesives, and a tissue adhesives, etc. So we may need to discuss about the different adhesive natures and then the different elastomeric natures in detail. So in fact, we have classified the different types of adhesive mechanisms which are being followed by this gecko inspired climbing. So this is one such mechanism. So as far as if you closely observe the overall mechanism of this particular gecko inspired climbing robot, so it has a different fiber in place. So this is called as a gecko food fiber, which we call it as setae. So as far as in these gecko food fibers are concerned, it has a kind of micro and a nano scale. So it has a nanofibers in place and then it has a microfibers in place. So these microfibers integrated with nanofibers are kept in such a way that like it acts as a kind of a compliant mechanism with high aspect ratio, and we call it as a beta carotene structure at their feet. So if you closely observe the feet of a lizard, you could see some kind of like integrated roughness will be generated. So these roughness will be capable enough in such a way that like it will be helpful for us, for the lizard to cater the suction. So this we call it as beta carotene structure at their feet, and these geckos can manage to adhere almost any kind of surface with a controlled contact area. So this is one advantage of these gecko structures. So as far as these gecko inspired climbing robots are concerned, so these gecko inspired climbing robots uses the principle of dry adhesion. So mimicking the gecko's ability to climb the smooth surface like glass and walls. So of course these dry adhesions will be helpful for them to walk or to climb the glass or a kind of a slippery surface without any issue. So these robots ideally uses a kind of a van der Waals forces which is used in a specialized material such as microstructured polymer adhesives to achieve adhesion without leaving the residue. So like this is one advantage of using this system. So now the question comes, why geckos? See, these geckos can climb vertical, a smooth and even an inverted surface due to a special structure of their feet, and this adhesion is based on the setae, that is a kind of a microscopic hair like structures. So these geckos feet has a million of nanoscale hairs which you call it as setae, each splitting into 100 of saptula shaped tips. So from the nano you have a multiple fibrous layer which is something like this. So this will take care of the adhesion with reference to the surface. Now if we need to mimic this structure, so appropriately we may need to develop such kind of structures so that we can have a control over the adhesion and we can appropriately have a control over the movement. Now one of the important mechanism which caters this adhesion includes the van der Waals forces. So as far as these van der Waals forces are concerned, these saptula tips interacts with the surfaces via a weak intermolecular forces, allowing the strong yet a reversible adhesion. So this will allow to hold the structure. Next, with reference to directional adhesion perspective point of view, the gecko can detect its feet effortlessly by changing its angle of toes. So these are the three different mechanisms which is being followed by the geckos for the different adhesion. So we will discuss about the different mechanisms involved in gecko inspired climbing robot in the next class.